So I noticed you've got some karaoke pics on your Facebook, huh? What's your go-to karaoke song?
Well, it's a tough topic because there's like the pre-R. Kelly era and then the post-R. Kelly era, you know.
We are live, and I'm happy to have Aaron Maté. He is currently a journalist at The Nation who recently won an award for outstanding achievements in independent media for his reporting over the last couple of years on Russiagate. So, being the expert and award-winning journalist on the topic of Russiagate, first, can you tell us what the hell is Russiagate? It's kind of a general term. A lot of people seem to be using it differently. How do you define Russiagate?
Russiagate is basically it's a conspiracy theory where the Trump campaign is accused of conspiring with the Russian government. And amazingly, somehow, this not only became, something that people believed in, but it became like the top political issue of the last 2 years. It starts with this allegation, which I also don't even think is proven, which is that the Russian government launched this sweeping interference campaign to elect Donald Trump. But even if that part is true, and I think there's a case for and against it, the notion that Trump and his campaign conspired with it, just has been the dominant issue of sort of defining Trump's election. And it continued even though all the, accumulating evidence for it in the indictments that Robert Mueller put out and all the reporting we got from it and the various leaks, all of that undermined the case for the conspiracy theory. But somehow the conspiracy theory sustained itself for so long. And I think it's impossible to maintain now. I mean, I think it was impossible before, but now it's like really impossible because Robert Mueller issued the sweeping report looking into all these things and he found no evidence to support it. But we'll see. I mean, Democrats are doing their best to keep it alive.
Yeah, to me, it seems like there's a lot of aspects to it beyond the Trump-Russia collusion conspiracy theory. Because you have the Russian hacking of the DNC, the calls for or description of this as being an act of war, the allegations of voter tampering or hacking voting booths, and then of course the whole social media thing. So maybe we can go through each one and kind of add proper context that was often missing in the initial reporting of all these stories. So we'll start with the Russian hacking. Now, I know you were rightly skeptical of this in the beginning, and then it seemed like you started to say, I recall you saying more recently, if you had to bet, it was the Russians based on all this new information in the Mueller report and in the indictments leading up to the full Mueller report. So, what is your thoughts now on it? Are you convinced that it was the Russians or what? What are you currently thinking?
Okay, here are my current thoughts. So after the indictment of the GRU officers, which was that came down in July 2018, and that was the first public evidence that we had, attributing this hacking of Democratic Party emails to the Russian government. And after that, that's when I said, if I had to bet, I would bet that there were Russians, if not the Russian government, maybe, but certainly that it's. If I had to bet, I would say that there were Russians who carried out this hack, and maybe even with the Russian government's knowledge, because it seems so improbable to me that Robert Mueller would lay out this extensive, detailed indictment. Even talking about the keystrokes of individual Russian intelligence officers, and for that to be not to be grounded in solid evidence, that seemed to be just improbable. But I also noted that we did not know the basis for all of Robert Mueller's evidence. We didn't know what it comes from. Now, since reading Robert Mueller's report, I'm actually less convinced, to be honest with you. I am, because for a couple of reasons. One is that Mueller has a couple of words in there that show that he is not conclusively certain that the Russian government stole the emails and that they transferred them to WikiLeaks. He's talking about Russian infiltration into the DNC servers. And then he says during this period, and I'm paraphrasing, the GRU appear, he uses the word, quote, appear to have stolen the DNC emails. Well, if it's that if it's appear, then that means that Robert Mueller does not know for sure, because if he knew for sure, he would just say the Russian government stole the emails. He wouldn't use the qualifier, they appear to have stolen the emails. And then later on, he says that we also can't rule out this notion that, or we can't rule out the possibility that WikiLeaks received the emails via an intermediary who came to visit the office, which meant that they were physically transferred, which means that they can't even transfer, or at least Robert Mueller can't definitively trace the transfer of the emails to WikiLeaks, which is different, or it's an acknowledgement that I hadn't seen from Mueller's prosecutors before. And then you have the fact that someone who's a very vocal advocate of the theory that it was a leak, not a hack, is Bill Binney, who is the former technical director of the NSA. And his contention is not new. He's been saying this for a while, and I didn't look too deeply into it, in part because I don't fully understand all the computer jargon. Like I'm not like, what I think is this issue should be debated by experts, and I think he's one of them who deserves at least to be listened to. And, I still don't fully get this whole thing he has about like transfer speeds and how the transfer speeds were impossible if it was a hack, but they were possible if it was a leak. But what I do, one point he does make, which I think is very interesting, is he says that the only government agency that could really attribute this to Russia would be the NSA. But in order for the NSA's information to be released publicly, they would have to go and get a court order to authorize that, because otherwise NSA information is redacted. You cannot release NSA information publicly. By definition, it has to be redacted. And there's no indication that Mueller did that. And we don't fully know where Mueller got that underlying information that he bases his indictment on, which is, as I talked about at the start of this long answer. But, from what I've heard, it comes from the FBI. And what I also know is the FBI did work with CrowdStrike, that DNC firm that first accused Russia of the hacking. And if that's the case, someone like Binney says that, like the FBI relying on CrowdStrike is just not an authoritative source. And, I don't like to give Roger Stone any credit, because Roger Stone is an asshole. is an asshole and a thief and a scumbag.
Liar. He's right?
But his lawyers, his attorneys now say in court filings that based on their discovery, or at least their understanding of the evidence, that the Mueller's evidence came from CrowdStrike. Now, I'm not saying they're right, but I'm saying they're making that.
Obviously, I know. Yeah.
They're making that contention in court. And this is an issue that is now going to be litigated in the discovery process. And if that contention turns out to be correct, then I just think that raises a whole bunch of new questions. On top of the fact that it never made, even the theory of the case for why Russia would do this, knowing that, no one thought that Hillary Clinton would lose. And we also know that according to the, narrative presented to us by CrowdStrike and Mueller, Russia's fingerprints were pretty easily discovered. So, this whole thing with Guccifer 2.0, leaving, Cyrillic language and Russian references. So whoever did this made it very easy to be discovered. And if that's the case, then why would Putin then risk getting even more sanctions from the U.S., especially knowing that it was, even with the release of these emails, Hillary Clinton was still going to be elected. So the theory of the case doesn't fully make sense. And certainly this notion that we've gotten that Vladimir Putin ordered this sweeping interference campaign to elect Trump, all that, the only evidentiary basis for that is anonymous claims by the CIA, which was controlled by John Brennan, who I just don't trust, and who I think opposes Trump for his own reasons. Not because John Brennan's woke, but because John Brennan doesn't see Trump as a suitable steward of the U.S. empire, basically. And because John Brennan really wanted to serve in Clinton's administration. So I, again, I'm not like a diehard proponent of any theory, but I do think after the Mueller report, I have less even certainty about the probability that it was the Russians than I did before the Mueller report.
For me, it was kind of the opposite. So the Mueller report did kind of. So I read most of the first volume, and at least parts regarding the social media in particular, and also of the Russian hacking. So to me, well, here, let me just tell you. See, I think it is totally.
Are you convinced by the social media aspect? Do you find that convincing?
Not as convincing, but I think it's totally plausible. Definitely plausible. And let me respond to some of your reasoning. So you said, you're like, why would Russia do this if we all understood that Hillary was going to win anyway? And I think because even if she were to win, if you do a propaganda campaign against her, that makes her start off on a worse foot. It is, establishes her as a weaker candidate, exposes all her flaws, and so you can prevent a politician from accomplishing a lot if you create this aura of negativity and doubt of this person, right?
I got that.
And then also,
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, no, sorry.
And then,
I'll leave it.
And then also, just what else you said? You said, how could Russia do this if they, you said they're sloppy, because they got caught, and they're supposed to be this super sophisticated intelligence team, right? But if in all the details, they did go through in the Mueller report, it details a lot of things that they did to attempt to cover their steps by using intermediary servers and only primarily using Bitcoin and with transactions. It just and then to respond to the other your points about how the wording, how in the Mueller report they say it appears that WikiLeaks got the files from Russia, or it appears, right? Is that reference?
It appears that they stole the emails.
Yeah, that as well. Okay, yes. So, but in all throughout the report, though, there's a lot of just statements without that qualifier, where it says these Russian intelligence agents and teams did hack information from the DNC. There's no qualifiers in those. And that's
well, exactly. And that's my point. So that distinction to me tells me that Robert Mueller can't definitively prove that Russia actually stole the emails. Because listen, Julian Assange has hinted at this. He said, I can't remember which interview, I think it was with RT, but that there is a conflation going on, that there is all kinds of hacking that goes on between governments into their political parties. And what I think he suggested is that basically the Mueller indictment was conflating different hacks or different spying attempts and different hacks. Some of them were carried about the GRU, and then mixing that up with the theft of the DNC emails. So, because for example, there was this story out of the Netherlands where the Russian intelligence officers were caught hacking, right? And then the Dutch intelligence agencies shared that information with the U.S., right? And I spoke to the Dutch reporter who behind that story, and he pointed out to me a distinction that I didn't even catch, but it's in the story, where actually what that story was about was previous Russian intrusions into the State Department and the DNC, not the 2016 DNC one, So what Assange was suggesting is that there was a conflation going on. I don't know. I'm not a diehard proponent of the theory. To me, ultimately, it's it doesn't have the significance that has been afforded to it, because it's when you compare it to what the U.S. does around the world, it's kind of a joke to me to compare all this to Pearl Harbor and to talk about us being under attack.
Yes. So that there's the context that that it was missing. That, I mean, either way, I totally agree with the argument you've been making the last couple of years, and that is that to call this an act of war is just so misleading and dangerous, considering that the U.S. hacks countries all over the world, including our allies. Mm-hmm. We spied on Angela Merkel's phone. I mean, so but with the logic, by saying that this Russian hacking of the DNC is an act of war, by that same logic, that would mean that America is at war with practically the whole world, which is a scary thought. And I don't think it is. It's not that as serious as people, make it. I hope that that's not true. I think these are exaggerations, like this whole calling it an act of war. What are your thoughts on that? Just that notion that by the same rationale, if this was an act of war, then wouldn't that mean that we're at war with practically the whole world?
Well, the irony there is that we are at war with the whole world in terms of our actions. Right now, the U.S. is trying to overthrow the government of Venezuela through these murderous sanctions, and I say that literally. These sanctions are killing, thousands, if not tens of thousands of people in Venezuela, openly trying to provoke a military coup by trying to, coerce and bribe leaders in Venezuela, military leaders in Venezuela. I mean, it's so to speak about the fact that we're still speaking about hacked emails and stupid social media clickbait when the U.S. is at, in terms of right now directly threatening war on Iran, also trying to punish the population with crippling murderous sanctions. So it's, which speaks to there's a utility to this whole Russiagate thing. It's not about standing up to a foreign power that is threatening our democracy, because even if Russia did steal the emails, it's not a threat to American democracy. Russiagate it's more or less a convergence of interests when it comes to powerful elites. And one of those interests is that fear-mongering about Russia and warmongering with Russia helps shore up the power of people who profit off of tensions with Russia. And it also helps whitewash the far worse actions we do around the world. And it also helps taint and marginalize those who speak out against corporate military power, because it accuses them of being dupes of the Russian government, who are our existential enemies. So this is all a very old playbook. And that imperative dovetails with other interests. It serves the interests of failed democratic elites who lost to Donald Trump in a campaign they should not have lost. And they get to blame this on Russia, and they get to deflect from the fact that their own stupidity cost them the election by raising this specter of the possibly Trump was conspiring with the Russian government. So, that's what all this is about. Russiagate's not a scandal on its merits. Even if Russia did steal the emails, this is not a scandal on its merits. It's a scandal by virtue of it being an issue benefits privileged people and helps justify their privileged positions.
And I think the biggest distraction is that term threat to democracy, calling the hacking of the emails of Russia a threat to our democracy. Well, the hacking of the emails revealed a real threat to our democracy. The rigging of the DNC made it, undeniable. That's a real threat to our democracy. Now, I think disinformation in general, I believe that's a threat to democracy. But of course, again, in context, if we, referring to the social media aspect now, obviously the Hillary Clinton and Trump campaigns and the U.S. media, the disinformation was far, the advertising budgets and propaganda campaigns were far more significant than that of the Russians.
Nobody would have noticed these stupid ads. And I say stupid because they're all stupid. Nobody can point to a single ad that was sophisticated or that they think had any impact on a single U.S. voter. I mean, it's a joke. The only reason we're hearing about them is because they're useful for an American disinformation campaign to fearmonger and convince us that we're the victims of a Russian disinformation campaign. If you look at the studies, only a small percentage of these ads even talked about the election. Most of the ads were posted after the election. They're basically a part of a classic clickbait scheme where you target certain demographics, evangelicals, gun owners, African Americans, and you try to inflame some, try to make them, edgy and sort of controversial in a bid to get clicks and get followers, so you can then leverage your following to sell ads. That's what even these studies that the Senate commissioned about the Russian social media ads acknowledged, that they had all the hallmarks of a traditional clickbait marketing scheme. But because they originate in Russia, and because it looks like the employees favored Trump over Clinton in the small number of posts that actually talked about the election, this became useful in an American propaganda campaign to convince us that we're threatened by Russian propaganda. So look, it's like if you look at all these ads, it's a joke, and it's an expression of such contempt that it's an expression actually of such elite contempt for average voters on two fronts. One, the notion that American voters are so malleable and so easy to be duped that these dumb ads that none of them even saw, because the numbers, by the way, are totally played up. It's ridiculous. But the idea that voters could be swayed by these stupid ads, whereas none of the political elites or media elites who say this, it's not as if any of them would ever claim that they themselves could have been duped by these ads. So what are they saying about voters in asserting as fact that this probably swung the election, as David Axelrod has said? I mean, it's a joke, and it says nothing to us about the ads themselves. It says to us about the contemptuous attitudes that political media elites have for average voters, the fact that this is even an issue. In terms of the numbers, there's this figure, 126 million Americans saw the ads. No. What that comes from is Facebook's general counsel, Colin Stretch, saying that our best estimate is that 126 million Americans may have had one of these ads appear in their Facebook feed at some point over a 2-year period. So, how many ads do you click on in your Facebook feed, in your feed? For me, the answer is 0. But, and how many, so Colin Stretch, so Facebook is saying that 126 million people may have seen one of these ads in a 2-year period. It's just a joke that we're even talking about it, but it speaks to how sophisticated American propaganda is, and the fact that we're talking about such a silly thing, and it's treated as the threat that it is.
What I found interesting is in the numbers, it said a lot of the ads, like this is the raw data, and it says a lot of the ads had 0 impressions. How is that even possible? How is that even possible? 0 impressions.
Because they're so dumb. Because the ads are so dumb, and they're so minuscule. Like there's like trillions of ads and posts on Facebook, and we're supposed to believe that this company's like this Russian troll farm spent $100,000 over a 2-year period, most of it after the election, and we're supposed to believe that that reached anybody. I mean, it defies logic and math, but that doesn't matter, because it speaks to Russiagate itself. It's not about the facts; it's about the imaginations of the influential political media voices who are peddling it.
I mean, I totally agree that it doesn't appear like this had any significant impact on the election whatsoever. But the whole idea that I think it's a scary truth that people really are that malleable and susceptible to mass propaganda campaigns.
I accept that on one level, but I don't. You cannot look at the volume of output from this Russian social media firm and think that I don't think a single person could have been convinced to do a single thing by any of these stupid ads. They're all so dumb. They're written in bad English. Nobody. So it's like the fact that we're speaking about them, I just don't understand why we're lending credibility to the notion that they could have influenced a single person to do anything, let alone to elect Donald Trump.
Well, they managed to get some people to show up to real life protests. Now, I'm not literally if you look at the videos, it's like 8 people. I think the most was maybe a dozen or a couple of dozen. So yes, you're right. I totally agree.
I stand correct. I do stand corrected, because I said that literally I don't think these posts got anyone to do a single thing. You're right. They did go to a couple of rallies, but it's
and even members of the Trump campaign were retweeting this bullshit. They didn't know they were interacting with, alleged Russian actors. So people do share this stuff. And I don't think one post would convince somebody's mind. But obviously, if you subscribe to all these feeds it can make an impression, but by no means do I think this had any significant impact on the election. But having read the report and the studies, all the numbers confirm that it didn't have a significant impact, if you look at the context, the greater context, but it still seems to establish to me that there was some, a campaign.
There was a campaign.
Yeah.
The question is it worth taking seriously and talking about? And I think no, given the fact that first of all, there's no connection to the Russian government, at least that we've made, except for the fact that the owner of the troll farm apparently is close to Putin. Although even that, I've yet to see the convincing evidence for that one. But even if he is, he started that company because he was a hot dog vendor, and his hot dogs were getting bad reviews. So he started his company to get trolls to write favorable reviews of his hot dogs online in Russia. That's literally how this troll farm started. And then it became so bigger. And that's why, the most...
And it started in 2013. So this, this wasn't... affecting the election was clearly not the main goal of this whole operation. Yes. But if you look the Mueller report does... Yeah.
If you look at the most popular post, right, it was like Yosemite Sam talking about how they want to take away his guns. Okay. Yeah.
But let's remember, Aaron, these. Okay, again, I mean, this is almost not an important argument, but I love arguing. And here's the thing: is I agree. These are dumb. They had no influence. But all ads, period, advertising, period, is dumb. Memes are dumb, and in mass, they can have an effect on people.
But there are a million ads that we're subjected to every day. And we have to ask ourselves, if we're talking about these Russian ads, these juvenile, minuscule in reach, stupid ads that nobody saw, then their significance to me is not in terms of their actual content or their reach. It's in the fact that they're useful for an American propaganda campaign.
Oh, yeah, sure. We're taking,
It's like I just don't think any of these dumb ads convinced anybody, except for, as you point out, yes, some people did show up to a rally. And
if it would convince some people to do a rally, it may have had an impact on some people's voting, which is less. It takes less effort than going to a rally. But I shouldn't be. Let's move on because really I totally agree. The bottom line is this had very little impact, if any. No, it's significant impact on the election.
And let me just say, finally, the utility is right in front of our faces. So Hillary Clinton has said, how did the Russians know to target their ads to Wisconsin and Michigan? Which is based on, it's not even based on fact. Even the premise of that is not even factual, because the number of ads that they posted in Wisconsin and Michigan was so small, and most of it wasn't even about the election. So it doesn't even make sense. But why is Hillary Clinton talking about Wisconsin and Michigan? In fact, in suggesting that the Russian ads swayed voters there, is because Hillary Clinton chose not to visit Wisconsin and Michigan, because her campaign decided that her message was so unpopular that she would do better if she just stayed away and didn't bring attention to her campaign. And so that is why, that's where the utility comes into play here. It's convenient to blame these dumb Russian social media ads for Hillary Clinton's decision not to even visit Wisconsin and Michigan, because her economic message was so unpopular.
And I agree 100%. My only difference, like I mentioned, after reading the Mueller report and reading all the specifics, is just I agree with everything you said, but I still think it's not helpful to deny that there was some. It sure appears that there was some activity.
I'm not denying it. I'm not denying it. I'm not denying. Okay, I'm saying it was juvenile and inconsequential.
Yes. Okay. And then also, I mean, likewise with the whole Russian hacking thing. So just to get back to the Russian hacking, I feel like, I also noticed, so we see all the specifics, but then when you see, they don't say how they know this information. What is their source for this information? That's the redacted part. That's all redacted. I guess what is odd to me is, don't we know that the NSA sucks up at all the information on the internet, thanks to whistleblowers? We know this. So why would they have to keep that classified, like they're the investigative techniques. That's what they redact. Investigative techniques. That's what they say.
Well, this is Bill Binney's point. He's saying that information did not come from the NSA, because if it had, they would have had to have gotten. I'm not even actually. In fact, I'm not even sure if they could even get a court order to unredact it. So Bill Binney is
not even for like a case like this, like a special
to release it publicly. Obviously, they could put it in a case, but to release
in a report, and keep as long as they redact that it came from.
But he's saying even the source of the information was not redacted, and so he's saying, well, which means it's his contention that it could not have come from the NSA, because yes, as you say, the NSA sees everything. They have they tap all the cables especially going out of the country, because they're especially concerned with foreign sabotage and cyber interference. So they tap everything. So Bill Binney is saying that if the NSA wanted to prove that the Russians did it, they could do it because they have all the information. His point is simply Mueller's information does not come from the NSA, because if it had come from the NSA, the information would have had to have been redacted, and he's saying that it wasn't.
Well, what wasn't but the information was redacted, at least the source of it. So I'm just not. I don't understand how we know for certain this couldn't have come from the NSA.
He's saying the information itself, the details about the supposed details about the Russian intelligence officers. He's saying all that would have had to have been redacted as well.
I understand he's saying that. I just don't understand why that is. He's
saying that's the law governing disclosures of NSA information. In the same way that the Reality Winner document that The Intercept posted about alleged Russian voter spear phishing, that it was illegal to release that because that's NSA information, and you just can't release that. So anyway, that's Binney's argument. Now, admittedly, I haven't. I'm actually in the process of doing this. I'm doing some reporting on this. I'm trying to nail this down. But I don't, but I'm just trying, and again, I try to read Bill Binney's arguments about the speed of the file transfer and download rate. I don't understand it, to be honest with you. I just don't.
Yes, no, I've had the same experience. And let me, I know you got to go soon, but I think this is a really interesting thing. I just want to just quickly, the whole Binney thing, regarding the whole Binney thing. Well, first, so I understand why you're still skeptical, because you don't see the raw data.
I don't see even the source of the information.
The source. Oh yeah, the source for the information. So in the Iraq War case, and that's kind of everybody's reference, this is why you don't just go along with narratives without seeing hard evidence. But what's different about Iraq and this Russia hacking accusation is in Iraq, we had Hans Blix. You actually had UN weapons inspectors saying there's no weapons of mass destruction. And I don't see any kind of, counter narrative with that kind of,
okay. Well,
you know what I mean?
You have Bill Binney, who is the former technical director of the NSA. And also, by the way, it's hard for me to do this analogy because Iraq and the hacking of a DNC one of them is a cyber crime.
Different scales.
Totally. Thing, right? But here's the thing. The problem with your analogy is that there was no Hans Blix allowed to inspect the DNC servers. Because the FBI didn't even take possession of the DNC servers itself. They weren't allowed to. They asked the DNC, but they were rejected, and they didn't try to get it.
Didn't they receive copies? Right?
They say they received copies, but those copies, the chain of custody, it first went to CrowdStrike, and CrowdStrike is a DNC contractor, and their CEO hates Vladimir Putin, openly hates Vladimir Putin. And CrowdStrike's some of their previous assertions, they made this claim about hacking in Ukraine, which they blamed on Russia, which they later had to retract after it was challenged. So the difference with the problem with your Iraq War analogy is that there was no Hans Blix to inspect the DNC server. It was just basically a DNC contractor, which is just not a trustworthy source in this case. It's not it's not a neutral chain of custody.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like the problem is I don't want to go too far with this. Because
I understand because you haven't looked into the Binney thing because we're not.
And it's quite plausible that Russia or some Russians stole the emails.
Yes.
I'm just not going to believe something because Robert Mueller says it's true. In the same way that, I didn't believe Robert Mueller, or I wouldn't if I don't remember if I heard them at the time or not. But if I had heard Robert Mueller when he was the head of the FBI say that we're worried that Saddam is going to give chemical weapons to terrorists, I wouldn't have believed him then unless there could be underlying credible evidence produced.
So, I mean, and I respect your, skepticism. I appreciate that. But the first when you compared Bill Binney to Hans Blix, two big differences I'd say is he's not in the NSA currently. Yes, he's a celebrated hero and genius. But still, the big difference. Not.
I never claimed it was a perfect analogy, and in fact, I made clear that it wasn't. It's not a perfect analogy.
Okay. I have tried. So I'm a fan of the Jimmy Dore show. I even work on the Jimmy Dore show, and Binney was on the Jimmy Dore show to explain his theory. Yeah. And so I'm familiar with it, and I entertained it. Uh-huh. But what I did is when I followed up on to see like his source, his source was this alias, this anonymous source that called themselves the Forensicator. And that's when I was like, well, who the hell is the Forensicator? Like I can, Bill Binney, I respect, but if he's getting his source from the Forensicator, who the fuck is the Forensicator? How can I trust this? Okay. And
wait. See, this is where I need to be cautious because I don't know the details like you do, but I also know I don't think Binney's sole source is the Forensicator. I think he was using some of his estimates about the speeds, or he was basing some of his estimates about the speeds on the Forensicator. But his main source is his own, I think, knowledge of how the NSA works. And he's saying it's like, and also about the file transfer format and the download speeds. This is where you should interview Bill Binney and challenge him on all this.
Yeah. Well,
I can't speak for him, but I also want to make sure that his point of view is not misrepresented. Because
yeah. I don't think I misrepresented it. He got his information from the Forensicator, even the analysis. He used the analysis of the Forensicator. He later did his own analysis with a respected investigative journalist, Duncan Campbell. I don't know if you've read this article yet. I totally recommend it. Like, 'cause if you say, you're kind of just investigate this theory, in Computer Weekly by Duncan Campbell, and Binney sat down with Duncan to do the math out. And among the things we learned, Duncan investigated this Forensicator character. He had another alias by Adam Carter, and then so he was hiding behind multiple aliases. Turned out to be some guy, some IT guy in the UK. So I'm just saying this for anybody who's interested, and learned about this, like we have through the Jimmy Dore show. And we're all fans of Binney and the Jimmy Dore show, but
I got you. But this is where you talked to Binney, because Binney, I spoke to Binney recently about this. His point was that the Forensicators, whatever mistakes were made there, they don't change his ultimate conclusion. And it's my impression that Duncan Campbell misrepresented Binney, that he was saying that Binney had changed his mind, when really actually his whole the only thing that I think Binney advanced from based on that new evaluation is that Guccifer 2.0 was even more of a fraud than he thought. But it's like this is where you should put this to Binney. I wouldn't even necessarily trust Duncan Campbell's reporting here. I actually don't, because my impression from speaking to Binney is that his point of view was misrepresented in that article. To be honest, that's my recollection of Binney's characterization to me.
Okay. What are your new projects? I know you are going to be. Is it correct that you're actually going to have this award ceremony tomorrow, for the IF or the Izzy Award?
Oh yeah. That already happened.
Okay.
I won. I was one of the recipients of the I.F. Stone Award, or the Izzy Award, which is named after I.F. Stone. And there was a ceremony, and it was recorded, and it's going to air Thursday night, which is May 22nd, right? Because today's the 21st. No, sorry, Thursday, May 23rd on Free Speech.
That's what I
TV.
thought. That's what I was thinking of. Okay.
Yeah, Free Speech TV.
Yeah.
And
okay, so it's just airing tomorrow. Gotcha.
Yeah. But that was a huge honor. You know, as you might imagine, challenging the prevailing Russiagate narrative has not won me too many friends, and it's, you know, it's for some reason been deemed controversial. But I just think it's doing basic journalism and following the facts, and from a political point of view, challenging something that I think has been a disaster for the left. You know,
we agree on that. There's no argument here.
And so it's just been and it's been strange for me that, you know, some of my colleagues in leftist and adversarial progressive circles can't see that, and how the small number of us who challenged it have somehow have been deemed to be, you know, it's like as if we're doing something bad, when really I think it's like, I mean, A, we're doing journalism, and B, this whole thing has been so awful for the left. Like, how can we not challenge it, you know? But so I think now, I mean, just like emotionally, I think Trump's victory was so difficult for so many people, which I understand, obviously. And I think this was just such a convenient way to explain it, and to also to hope for, you know, that this was going to be the vehicle through which the Trump nightmare ends. But I think now that fantasy is dying a bit with the aftermath of the Mueller report being so underwhelming and showing how baseless this whole thing was, even though Mueller and his team, I think, tried really hard to like paint the most damning picture they could of Trump and Russia, but there's just nothing there. So there's only so much deflection and diversion they could do. So I'm hoping now that we can all wake up in time in time for, you know, the 2020 election, because I just think this whole thing was a huge gift to Trump. It diverted his opposition's energy away from his actual policies and into this conspiracy theory and the fantasy that Mueller would validate it. And then it gave him another gift when Mueller came back and didn't validate it, because now Trump can claim exoneration. So I'm hoping that we can snap out of it in time for 2020, and you know, do the kind of soul searching we needed to do after 2016, which is, how did this man win? How did this misogynist, you know, liar, how did he con all these people into voting for him? And, you know, what lessons can we learn from that? Which has been forestalled by this Russiagate thing. So I'm hoping that we can look now at, you know, at the real causes, which was a failed, you know, Democratic elite neoliberal legacy when it comes to economics at home and military intervention abroad, and, you know, try to correct that and build policies in the other direction in time for 2020. Because if not, I just think Trump's opponents are handing him just a re-election.
Yes. With all the allegations, speaking of, we'll end on lessons to learn. You gave us some there, and I'm just going to ask you for one more lesson. With all this hoopla about, disinformation campaigns and such, it's like with all this reporting on it, I'm seeing like there's one clear solution that people aren't really writing about so much, and it's obviously just a little media literacy, right? It's important to defend from all propaganda from the U.S. government, from any government, any corporation, any individual, any independent media. So, Aaron, could you leave us with a 1 minute or so lesson in basic media literacy?
Well, all media, no matter what country it's in, reflects the interests of the people who control it, and the people who control it want to appeal to and are in partnership with. And here in the U.S., we have a media that is controlled by a relatively small number of corporations, whose main concern is appealing and reinforcing the worldview of other corporations who buy their ads and who they have to pay dividends to, and also the elite audiences that they want to sell products to, because, you know, the wealthier your audience is, the more valuable you are as a media property. And so accordingly, there's a whole set of incentives inside the media structure to pedal to that line. And so you know, media literacy to me is just being aware of the interests behind all the information we consume, and to, you know, use common sense to their claims, and to not necessarily take people's claims on faith, to insist on evidence, and to question the agenda behind what we're hearing, because so often it's not about, you know, the search for the truth. It's about reinforcing the interests and the imperatives of those who are giving you the information. So, you know, be skeptical of government claims, especially when it comes from intelligence officials who, even if on the surface it sounds like they oppose Trump, and that might be attractive because we oppose Trump too as leftists, but they might not oppose Trump for the same reasons we do. They might oppose Trump because they don't like the fact that he is not an effective manager of their system of coercion and power. So, you know, just be skeptical and use common sense. That's my more than 1 minute lesson in media literacy.
Thank you, Aaron. And I share your faith in common sense. You've mentioned it before that only maybe 1% of Americans think that this is a real concern, the Russia intervention. And so that's evidence to have faith in human common sense. And so we can end this on a positive note. And Aaron, thanks so much for joining me, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it.
While we're waiting, I gotta say, so I noticed you've got some karaoke pics on your Facebook, huh? What's your go-to karaoke song?
Well, it's a tough topic because there's like the pre-R. Kelly era and then the post-R. Kelly era, you know. So once the truth about R. Kelly really emerged, it really changed my whole thing, you know, because you can't sing R. Kelly, you know, and but it's really changed over the years. Like there was a big Journey phase.
It's a classic go-to.
But not Don't Stop Believing. I never did Don't Stop Believing because I always thought Don't Stop Believing was just too played out. I'm more of like a, you know.
That's good to hear. I respect that.
Yeah, I'm more of a B-side Journey karaoke singer.
Okay. So just Journey.
You know, actually, I have a little list on my phone. I can read you my, you know, like I keep my karaoke hits.
That is so funny.
I keep my karaoke go-to, so let's see what I got.
You know what? We should have guessed it because you know everyone else, they got like a headset on for those things. You hold your microphone. You can tell you're like born to karaoke. You know. Like,
so recent ones I've done. Hey Jealousy by the Goo Goo Dolls. That's a classic.
Yes.
Muscles by Diana Ross.
Nice.
My Name Is Not Susan by Whitney Houston. Can You Stand the Rain by New Edition. And Big Bang Baby by STP. So a lot of, you know, an eclectic mix there of 80s and 90s. Yeah.
I think I'd go not Diana Ross, but you know, if I ever did it again, some Donna Summer. I could.
That sounds
Donna
great.
Summer really gets me going.
That sounds great.
Yeah, I had a bad. I've only done karaoke once, and my experience, it was I did the Red Hot Chili Peppers "Suck My Kiss," which I just because I knew all the lyrics, and I love the Chili Peppers. But but I had never really, you know, said those lyrics out loud, and in particular in front of a whole audience. And oh my God, it is like. It's so misogynistic. Like I didn't realize how terrible that was.
How did the chorus go? Like, suck your dude to feel my bliss, but now you need to suck my kiss.
Exactly. It's the line. The killer line is just like, your life, quote, your life was made to suck my kiss. Like, whoa. And so I had this on memory, but I just never just saying it out loud is like, damn. And to an audience, like, shit. Like that was just embarrassing as fuck. But I love that tune. Great song.